Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to get the debate underway. I'm Rory McLaren, President of the SA Press Club, host of Mornings on 891 ABC Radio Adelaide and the moderator for today's debate. Tomorrow, early voting centres open right across South Australia ahead of election day. And if the public polling is any guidance, Labor is on track for a very comfortable victory, while the Liberals, they face the prospect of a historic defeat. There is, though, a wild card, One Nation, and whether the support for that party happens to materialise. As at every election, South Australians, they have a choice. And over the next hour, you'll hear from the two major party leaders as they outline their visions while being questioned about the decisions they have made and their performance. Please welcome the Labor Premier, Peter Malinauskas, and Opposition Leader from the Liberal Party, Ashton Hurn. While we get those photos of the ceremonial handshake, both leaders will have 3 minutes for opening addresses towards the end of the debate. Each leader will have an opportunity to ask at least one question of their opponent before closing remarks. That will run for 2 minutes. Now, we had a coin toss a little bit earlier. The Premier won the toss and he has chosen to speak first. Premier, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Rory. Thanks to the Press Club, to the Leader of the Opposition, Ms Ashton Hurn, ladies and gentlemen. I'll never forget a conversation I had a couple of years before I entered the State Parliament in 2013 at the Elizabeth City Shopping Centre. It was with a fella who had recently lost his job at Holden, and he was explaining to me the pain that was causing him. And I asked, naturally, it's obviously hard to pay the bills or pay for the roof over your head. And he said, mate, the problem's not the money. I've got a redundancy. Financially, I'm sweet. He said, problem is I don't want to feel like a loser. He explained that he missed his mates at work. And it struck me because it was a plain and clear example of just how important the dignity of work is to people's identity, their sense of self-worth, their character. And at that time, people in this state were worried about where the work was coming from. Fast forward 4 years ago, the state was still at the bottom of all the league tables on economic performance. But today, we're at the top of the charts. We have the lowest unemployment rate in our history, the highest participation rates in our history, the fastest growing economy in the country and the fastest growing real wages in the nation. The place is on fire. And it's not an accident. It's because a lot of people in this room have got to work. But so is your government. I lead a centrist, disciplined, united, committed team that is only focused on making the most of all of the potential that this state has always had. And we are bringing it to life. It has been the privilege of my life over the last 4 years to lead that work. It has put the state in a position where the rest of the country now looks at us very differently than any other time during the course of my lifetime. But the opportunities have only just begun. We know, with considered policy and ongoing momentum and effort, we can ensure that young South Australians face the possibility of owning their home, providing opportunity for their family in a way that passes on from one generation to the next. And the contrast of unity of purpose and discipline on my side of politics versus the alternative is there for everyone to see. Next week, people will vote and they will determine their future government. I hope they're able to determine one with confidence in the knowledge that we remain dedicated to the task today as much as we have over the last 4 years.
Premier, thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you, Premier, and to all of the guests here today. And look, standing here at Adelaide Oval, it does feel a bit like we're heading into the last quarter of the grand final. And if you do believe the polls, I'm captaining a side that is certainly a few goals down and certainly kicking into the wind. But if there's one thing that I know about sport, and if there's one thing that I know about politics, it's this: never, ever write off the underdog, because it's not over until it's over. Here's what I also know. We've got people who are turning off of politics and politicians because they are sick of big promises being broken. At the last election, including on this stage, the Premier promised big and he has failed to deliver. And today he really should apologise. I've seen some coverage in the ABC, but the Premier has failed to actually say those words, "I am sorry." So I'd encourage him to do that today. Now, our plan for this election is pretty simple. Some would say it's not that sexy, but it's about getting the important things right for the people of South Australia, making sure that we've got an affordable state, a better healthcare system for patients and staff, and safer communities. Now, throughout our time in opposition, we've put forward many practical policies that focus very squarely on affordability. Immediate tax relief by lifting the payroll tax threshold, abolishing stamp duty for first home buyers, including on existing homes, keeping choice with the individual, and a full review of taxes, fees and charges in South Australia, which over the last few decades have turned into a Frankenstein monster. And we've also put forward a plan to tackle the health system, which is clearly in crisis, where ramping is off the charts despite promises to fix it, and emergency departments are bursting at the seams. We've also got plans to stop the revolving door of crime in South Australia. If you break bail under a Liberal government, then you'll face jail. And my promise to you is that a government that I lead will say what it means and delivers on its promises. Now, I grew up on a family farm on the outskirts of Angaston, and I learnt two things pretty quickly. You need to work hard, and that your word is your bond. That is my leadership style, and I will always put the team first. I got into politics because I love this state, I love our people, and I am super optimistic about our future. And like the Premier, I'm ambitious for South Australia, but this is where we differ. My ambition is not for a bigger government or a more interventionist government. My ambition is to run a government that simply gets out of your way and lets you get on with doing the job that you want to do. A government that gives South Australia freedom to succeed and to be rewarded by your efforts. A government where you can pay your bills, and that's what I'll be focusing on.
That's
Rory.
time, Leader. Thank you. We're going to start with news of the week. We're going to start today discussing some of the issues which have dominated the campaign this week. Last Friday, the government released an email which was thought to be from Stephen King, a dying cancer patient who spent some of his last hours ramped in an ambulance outside the Royal Adelaide Hospital. The email leak followed Mr King's widow, Bronwyn Patterson, going public with stories of her concerns. But it turned out the positive email released by the government came from a different person with the same name. Premier, the email bungle has been publicly described as grubby and shameful. The Health Minister has apologised, but he still has a job. How could the South Australian public trust a future Labor government when it's behaved like this with someone's information?
Because people can take confidence in that. We haven't denied the mistake. In fact, the opposite's true. When I first learned of it on the weekend, I stood up at a press conference on Saturday and said this is unacceptable, and the Health Minister apologised, acknowledged the fundamental error that he made. I think there was an error on 2 counts. I've been candid, very candid about that, and admonished it accordingly. And I guess that's the point. No government's perfect. We've never suggested we're infallible, and this is a clear example of that. And if you're not willing to be honest about your mistakes, you can't be proud about what you've done right. And I think we've shown that this week. And I know, look, I've known Chris all my life, well, not all my life, my professional life, and I know how bad he feels about the mistake that he made and the bad call he did. And he's made that apology clear, not just publicly, but also to the individual concerned.
Leader?
Oh, well, I think that you've apologised, or the Health Minister's apologised, because you were caught out about it. And this goes to the very heart of what is fundamentally wrong with this government, that they are so focused on politics and PR, and they will put that ahead of everything else. And I think that it does go to the heart of judgment. I mean, how can you have a health minister in charge of the health system where you're supposed to lead with empathy and compassion? And the judgment was not to reach out and offer ways in which they could improve the health system, but rather to go ferreting through emails to find anything to try and discredit this poor woman who had quite literally lost her husband a year ago, who spent 1 hour in the back of an ambulance on the day that he died, stuck outside the hospital where he was offered a Zupa-Duper. I mean, this goes to the very heart of what is wrong, I think, Premier, with your government, that you are so obsessed with politics, PR and your image that you're losing sight of what matters more broadly to the people of South Australia.
Premier, I'll give you an opportunity to respond if you like.
Yeah, well, look, like I said, he made a mistake and it was a bad one, and he's owned it and been honest about it. The truth is, when it comes to the performance of the health system itself, there is clearly the inability to be able to get ramping hours down as much as we'd like, but also there's been dramatic improvement in ways that represent the difference between life and death. None more important than getting ambulances running on time. This time 4 years ago at this debate stage, when you called 000 with a life-threatening emergency, there was a 2 in 3 chance the ambulance is going to roll up late. 2 in 3 chance the ambulance is going to roll up late when your life depended upon it. Those numbers are now completely reversed, and thousands of South Australians are alive today to tell the story. So the idea that you're committed to empathy has to reflect itself in actual policy and investment, which is precisely what we've done.
And which is precisely what we'll get into in a little bit more detail soon, though, Premier, but I want to move on. Leader, on to Ashton Woodhouse, your now former Liberal candidate for the seat of Wright. On a Christian podcast, he described Islam as poisonous and wrong, that same-sex marriage isn't real, that feminism is demonic, amongst other statements. What does his pre-selection say about your party's vetting processes and the state of the SA Liberal Party at large?
Well, I've been really clear that I don't support those views, and they are not the collective views of the South Australian Liberal Party. I think I was asked this question yesterday or the day before when I fronted up to do media, in that I'm on a constant path for improvement. So if the Liberal Party can improve its processes, then I'm very happy to look into that with the State Director. But at the end of the day, I know that there is a bit of an obsession, particularly from the ALP and the media, about the internal workings of the Liberal Party. But I think what is fundamentally wrong with politics right now, and why we are seeing such a shift to minor parties, is because too many politicians are busy talking about themselves. That's not the type of politician that I am. I'm out there talking about the real issues that people care about. I can tell you, no one stopped me in the street to ask me about this. People are stopping me to say, what are your plans to lower energy bills in South Australia? What are you doing to address the affordability crisis that we've got? Those are the issues that people are talking to me about, and I'm not going to be a navel-gazing politician. I'm going to be focused on what people care about, the important things, and that's where my focus is.
Premier, you might want to respond to that, I think.
Yeah. Well, standing up for basic decency in this country isn't navel-gazing. It's a matter of character. It's a matter of principle. Islamophobia, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, this is not okay. And only a couple of days ago, the alternative Premier of South Australia is standing up and saying, oh, this is just another view that's welcome in the Liberal Party. Well, what sort of Liberal Party do we have these days then? I stood up on this stage with Ashton's predecessor, utterly united to multicultural South Australia, standing up opposed to homophobia in all its forms. Now, in the Liberal Party, they're pre-selecting people that believe this stuff. The whole party apparatus has jumped the shark. And then what happened in the last 24 hours? Well, the Leader of the Opposition said, oh, well, I don't agree with these views. He's not the candidate anymore. And then the media asked her, well, who made that call? And Ashton didn't want to answer. And you know why? Because it wasn't her decision. It was Ashton Woodhouse's decision to pull the pin. And he pulled the pin and said, and I stand by everything I say.
Okay.
And then the Liberal Party director said, and fair enough too. I don't think it's fair enough.
Let's give the Leader an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, The Premier seems to have quite a few minutes on his hands, I think, if he's getting into the intricacies like that, but he's clearly missed one individual fact, and that was a statement where it was made pretty clear that there was a request to step down and that was accepted. But again, here we've got a Premier, and frankly it's reflective of the entire team. I note a few ministers here, and they've spent more time talking about me and the Liberal Party as opposed to the people of South Australia. And I just kind of question, I think, do you even think you need to try it this election? Or are you just so determined just to tear down the Liberal Party that you're not putting forward your own positive plan to the people of South Australia?
Well,
because you might say, oh, you're putting forward your plans, but you lead a team who's more obsessed with the Liberal Party than they are with improving the lives of the people of South Australia. And you talk about leadership. That means, yeah, you do need to take responsibility for your teammates.
Yep. Let's give the Premier a chance.
Well, I'm very keen to get onto policy, Rory, that we take into this election. But let me quote someone else who spoke on this matter in the last 48 hours, the most senior Liberal senator in this state. He's the one that stood up in the federal parliament. Ashton's colleague stood up in the federal parliament and said, if this bloke gets disendorsed, then South Australia should shut the door on the South Australian Liberal Party at the state election. That was a senior Liberal talking about Ashton and her campaign. So it's not me talking about this, it's your team talking about this. You pre-selected this guy, not us.
All right, let's move on from this. Let's go back to health. Will either of you, right here, right now, promise to fix the rampant crisis? Premier.
What I will do is continue to invest to expand the size and the capacity of the South Australian hospital system, because we've got a bigger population and an ageing population. And if you don't have the resources to be able to deal with that, you don't make a difference. Now, I absolutely, like I said earlier, I acknowledge that we have not been able to deliver on the reduction in ramping that we pursued. But we have delivered on the policy to have hundreds more doctors. We said we'd deliver 100, we've given 600. We said 300 nurses, 1,400 extra nurses delivered, and a lot more ambulance officers, and I'm very glad to have done it. And I say that because ambulances are now running up on time and hundreds of thousands of patients are getting treated every year. Occasionally it goes wrong, but overall majority of the time people get excellent service. But more than that, we have a policy to address some of the fundamental challenges that haven't seen the ramping reduction, and that's outside of the state government's control in terms of aged care. So rather than just finger-pointing the federal government, we're taking to this election a policy to see a massive expansion in aged care services.
We'll come back to that more in a moment, but to you, Leader, do you promise to fix the ramping crisis?
Well, I can guarantee you this, I can promise you this, that I'll be a leader that actually delivers on my promises, unlike the Premier. And I think it's pretty remarkable that the tune has changed so much, given here we were at the last election and the Premier was waxing lyrical every second day, promising to fix the ramping crisis. And instead of owning up and instead of saying, I am sorry for the biggest political lie in South Australian political history, he tries to wave the white flag and blame the federal government instead of actually looking in the mirror. And again, I think it is a test of leadership. No amount of PR or razzle-dazzle on events and things like that will take away from the fact that you have failed to deliver on your #1 election promise and you've not said sorry for it. Now, we've got a comprehensive plan that we're taking to the election, and it does look at the broad challenges across the system. It looks at access to GPs, it looks at workforce and building that pipeline for the next generation, and we too have policies to make sure that we can get people out of the hospitals when they don't clinically need to be here.
I'll give the Premier another opportunity now, Leader.
Well, look, we continue to invest in the hospital system. We have an actual genuine plan to make a difference. I've been very candid and have apologised the fact that we haven't been able to deliver the reductions in ramping.
You haven't said I'm sorry.
We've done it. I've done it plenty of times.
Will you say I'm sorry?
Do you want to do it now?
I have. I have done it before. I did it at an advertising forum,
sorry.
and we do apologise that we haven't delivered. We do, and because we have invested an awful amount of effort and money, and we have made a difference, but not as much as we would have liked. But you don't stop investing, and you don't stop making reform, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I guess this is, and I've been candid about this from the start, you can't be proud about what you've done right if you're not honest about where you have got it wrong. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think that's what good governments do.
Let's move on to the algal balloon. Premier, What did you get wrong when it came to the initial response to the algal bloom? Did the slow initial response damage public confidence in your government's ability to appropriately manage what has become an environmental disaster?
I think every reasonable person, unless you are producing fake high evidence like Liberal colleagues did in the state parliament, I think every reasonable person knows that this wasn't as a result of the algal bloom didn't happen because of a state government decision or action.
I'm not asking about, with respect, Premier, I'm asking about the state government's response.
Sure. And in respect to our response, our response has been one of the most substantial investments in environmental research and environmental recovery and economic response.
Sorry, I'm talking about specifically here, Premier, the initial response, those first few months of the bloom.
Well, the first few months we acted in accordance with all the scientific evidence and advice that was coming our way, which strikes me as a prudent course of action. We had some of the best marine scientists providing advice to the government throughout the course of this, no different to how you would respond to a pandemic. You receive the science, you listen to what the experts tell you, and you act accordingly. And when we started to see in the middle of last year that the forecasts and the predictions in regards to the movement of the algal bloom were not performing in the way that the experts had initially foreshadowed, we recalibrated our response accordingly, which is prudent. I'm very grateful that we stand here today with the algal bloom essentially gone and has been for some time. There is still some lingering algae counts on the Yorke Peninsula, but it's also true that we've largely got through it, and now we have the opportunity to invest in environmental recovery, which is something that we're committed to.
I'll give the Leader an opportunity now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rory. And I think there's no doubt that the algal bloom has completely decimated some regional communities, particularly the aqua industry, fishing industry, and getting out on the ground and speaking to some of the fishermen and fisherwomen, as I have, it's pretty clear that more could have been done. And I think it comes to the fact that you can't afford to take your eye off the ball when a crisis hits. When a crisis hits, you've got to be ready to act. And I don't believe that this government was. Whilst I do acknowledge that there was a package that was put forward, and we certainly welcomed that, the tardiness by which the money went out the door to people who were impacted was something that we put rightly under the spotlight for people. And now I think we do need to work together to make sure that we have a long-term recovery, because it's too important to let go by the wayside. But there's no denying that had the government acted sooner, then there potentially could have been fewer impacts.
Were you too slow to get money out the door, Premier?
Well, I completely disagree with what the Leader of the Opposition remarks reflects. And don't have to ask me, if you speak to the head of the commercial fishing sector in South Australia, they're nothing but complimentary of the government's response. Similarly, for people at Recfish, acknowledge the government's investment and response. And the Leader of the Opposition is sitting around saying, as though an unprecedented algal bloom, which has never happened before in the history of the Commonwealth, somehow the government should have stopped it from happening or responded within days of its first presentation in a way that's inconsistent with the advice, is frankly playing politics with these sorts of things. I remember when the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, and hopefully everyone here does as well. I was there, lock stop, even when I was getting criticised by all sides of politics. I was backing in Stephen Marshall and the Liberal government because it was an unprecedented crisis that required bipartisan support. Their instincts was to play politics day one, suck up to the far-right conspiracy theorists who were talking about desal plants. Frank Pangello walks in the parliament and says, "I've got you," puts on the table in the parliament a whole bunch of evidence. Turned out it was fabricated through AI.
All right.
That was their response. We were actually just supporting the community.
Let's go back to the Leader and give her a chance to rebut what you've just said.
Well, I think there's only one person on this stage that's obsessed with conspiracy theories, and it seems to be you, because you've mentioned that a few times now. The point that I'm making, which is a very valid one, is that you've got to act quickly and decisively. And yes, you would argue that you put your money out there and whatnot, but you didn't get it out quick enough to communities. You didn't get it out quick enough to individual businesses. And day after day, Nicola Centofanti, who's the Shadow Minister, and I were speaking to people on the ground who could not get the relief that they needed, and that is on your watch.
Let's turn to credibility, if we can. Leader, you are the third person to lead your party in little more than 18 months. One of your predecessors was found guilty of drug supply charges. Another stood down in the shadow of the election. Your party lost 2 by-elections to the government this term in seats that were both held by former party leaders. What assurance can you provide the electorate that your party is remotely ready to govern, given your party's performance over the last 4 years?
Well, first of all, we've got to be honest about the fact that the party has had some challenges. I don't shy away from that at all. I've been upfront about that, and when it comes to the election, I've been saying that yes, we've got a mountain to climb, but I hope that people and voters at home can see that we've been a united team that's actually focused on talking about policy and making sure that people know exactly what we'll do for them in terms of affordability. And, you know, I'm really proud to stand here as the female leader of the Liberal Party in South Australia. I'm excited about the plan that we've got. And, you know, I know that there would be a few commentators about the state of the Liberal Party, but for me, I'm just focused on the future. It's so easy in politics to get distracted, to go down this rabbit warren of commentators and looking in the past, but I think when you are the leader, you've got to look forward, and that's well and truly where my focus is. What I would say just on the broad topic is that on this stage, there's only one person who has been required to wear a wiretap when they've met with former colleagues or current colleagues, and that's the Premier.
Premier?
I don't mind that as an example. Because that extraordinary set of circumstances happened because I was willing to wear the political consequences of doing what I believe is right, not allowing House of Cards style politics to get an airing. And I will always be a leader that is willing to do what is right, even if it's at my own political expense. People have seen that I'm willing to make decisions in the full knowledge that we plenty of people, including on my own side of politics, disagreeing with it. I had one at the beginning of the year with Writers' Week. You've got to assess your conscience and do what you believe is right. And that's the style of leadership that actually creates a culture of discipline and unity and focus on what the actual task is at hand. And that just doesn't exist in the Liberal Party. And, you know, even when you look at it objectively, in the last 24 hours, their crisis of culture has spilled out just before people start to vote on the floor of the federal parliament.
Okay.
I mean, normally people can have a veneer of unity before an election. They're breaking out into warfare over matters of
I'll give the leader
principle.
an opportunity now, Premier. Leader?
Oh, I just reject that. We are a united team, and that's what we're proving to the people of South Australia. I hear the Labor laughs in the audience, but I would like to just put back on the Premier. There's been a lot of talk, obviously I've seen in various papers about the situation with Annabelle Digance, and one question that just hasn't been raised is who's actually paying for it? Is the taxpayer footing the legal bill for this? That's something that we're really keen to get an understanding of, and I do think that that goes to your credibility, because this situation has eventuated because of your relationships with a former ALP member, not in your role as Premier of South Australia.
Premier?
I've got to say, I did not anticipate that the Leader of the Opposition would be raising this matter, given that the Supreme Court of South Australia just made it perfectly clear that my actions were entirely appropriate.
Yeah, but
Never before have I stood on a stage with the Leader of the Opposition that is seeking to make a political critique on when there has been a Supreme Court decision handed down making clear that my actions were entirely appropriate.
So to the Leader's
And I'm
question.
It's not about your actions, it's about who's paying for the legal bill. Is it
Well,
you
there
or
is as the Leader of the Opposition is well aware, there is an appropriate indemnification policy that exists for all Cabinet members, one that I understand many of your former colleagues have got access to. You know, again, goes to, you know, my surprise that the Leader of the Opposition, at least in their slogans, has tried to make law and order an issue, given there's more criminals in the parliament from the Liberal Party than there are women.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Let's leave
it's
that
quite
there.
extraordinary.
Premier, this is the 2026 Leaders Debate coming to you live from Adelaide Oval, being broadcast on ABC TV and ABC Radio. Let's now turn to One Nation. Given you are both standing on this platform alongside each other, how do you respond to being described as the uni party by One Nation SA lead candidate Corey Bernardi, Ashton Hurn?
Well, I reject it completely because we've got a completely different value system. For the Liberal Party, we're all about freedom of thought, freedom of action. That's not something that exists with the ALP, and in particular, we're really focused on, through all of our policies, ensuring that people have choice. So that's where my focus is. And to be honest, again, I'm not a commentator on One Nation. I will let them row their own canoe. I'm focused on what the Liberal Party can do for the people of South Australia. I know that there's been some interest from the commentariat and the like, and ALP have made some comments about it, but it's just not where my focus is. When you're the leader of a major political party, you can't be distracted, and I'm certainly not.
Before I go to the Premier on the question of One Nation, Leader, on numerous occasions since taking this role, you've spoken of Sir Robert Menzies and the forgotten people. Are you worried that it's One Nation speaking to those South Australians and not your party?
Well, no, because we're focused on getting the important things right in all of our policies that we've put forward on affordability, on health,
That wasn't the question.
and on crime.
That wasn't the question, Leader. I'll bring you back to the question. Are you worried that One Nation is speaking in a more coherent way to the people you're trying to speak to?
Oh, I wouldn't characterise it like that. I'm enjoying getting out and speaking to as many people as I possibly can. And look, there are a number of political parties in South Australia and across the country that you need to be mindful of, but I'm not focused on them. I'm focused on what the Liberal Party can do.
Premier, One Nation, what do you think a strong vote for that party at this election would say about the state you've led for the last 4 years?
Well, let's wait and see what the vote is on election day. I think it is going to be one of the more interesting things to see. And people who know me and my politics and the things I've been speaking about, for a decade, would know that I'm worried about the rise of populism around the world. We've been able to hold it at bay in Australia largely, but now it feels like it's very much at our shores. And I think, when we contemplate One Nation voters in the community, I think it's important that we don't look down on them and dismiss them and seek to understand, what are their frustrations. And I, for one, have a very firm view about that. I think economic inequity and a sense of lost opportunity for some people in the community has driven a sense of anger and frustration, and none more important than housing, which is why, the principal policy focus that we've got in the lead up to the election is around a comprehensive...
I do want to go to housing now, if
sure.
I can, for both of you, Premier and the Leader. Premier, how will the vast amounts of so-called enabling infrastructure to open up blocks for development at places like Concordia outside of Gawler be paid for? Will it be up to taxpayers, developers, or people who on their water bills?
All of the above. And we've been transparent about that, which is why you've seen South Australia go from a laggard in terms of housing growth to now having the fastest housing growth rate in the country. When we came to office, we had a rental vacancy rate in South Australia of 0.4%. We've been able to get it up to 0.8%. We want to get it above 1%. 8 to 10,000 homes a year were being built. Last year, we built 12,500 new homes. We built more new homes completed in calendar year 25 than any other 12 months in the history of the state. And we've got a policy to take that from 12,500 a year up to 13,500 a year. A regular drumbeat, year in, year out. And one of the key things that allows us to do that is because the state is accepting our responsibility, that we have a role to play, particularly when it comes to water infrastructure. We're releasing the land, absolutely. We're doing the code amendments at record speed. But we're also investing in the requisite infrastructure and sharing the costs between the developer, the people who pay their water bill, and the government. It was a big policy decision that was flatly opposed to the extent that the Liberal Party promised that they were going to undo that particular change to water bills.
Premier.
And then, of course, they slipped out that they changed their mind.
We will give the opposition leader a chance to have a word.
Thank you. Oh, look, there's no doubt that housing is the #1 issue in South Australia. Everywhere I go, we've got people, it doesn't matter whether you're an elderly citizen or you're just seeking to get your foot into the housing ladder, access to housing, making it affordable is the #1 concern. What I would say is that the Premier talks a lot about his grand ambition to build 13,500 houses per year. Well, that's short of what the National Housing Accord is. So you've given yourself a big pat on the back, but you're not even achieving what the National Housing Accord is, which is around 16,000. Now, we've got some really practical policies in place. It is about supply. All of the supply measures that the Premier and his government put forward over the last 4 years will obviously continue if I'm elected as Premier. But importantly, we still want to give people choice about where they live. And that's something that you don't have when it comes to the government's policies, particularly around stamp duty, because you have to be new builds. And we say, why should the government dictate and determine where you live and the community that you live in? We're really clear on our stamp duty policies, and we're excited at the potential that we could roll them out.
Premier, I can sense you're chomping on the bit.
So the Liberal Party's policy on housing is going to make the problem worse, because to remove stamp duty on existing builds means we're going to have more people bidding for the same home that already exists. And there's enough very intelligent people in the room to know precisely what the outcome of that will be: higher prices. But even if you don't believe me, believe Daniel Gannon, former Property Council Executive Director, Ashton's former senior Liberal colleague. He said about the Liberals' policy, Ashton's policy, sometimes even pitting older and younger buyers against each other for the same type of house, which could of course push prices up rather than ease pressure at this particular commitment might want to do. Their policy will make the problem worse. We are abolishing taxes, as we've already done, for stamp duty for all first home buyers. And now we're going to take that abolition of stamp duty for downsizers, provided it's on a new build, to create more stock. And we know that our policy is already making a difference, because we've gone from 10,000 homes per annum to 12,500. And we have the run rate to improve.
We'll stick on this. We'll go back to the leader.
Oh, just to say that we've got the 6th least affordable housing market in Australia, second only to Sydney. So I think that clearly speaks to a problem that needs to be addressed. But we make, as much as I've got great regard for Daniel Gannon, absolutely, but we also want to see the property market moving again. We need to see the housing market moving, and that's why through our stamp duty policies we are addressing the downsizing issue to remove just some of that financial barrier when it comes to people wanting to downsize. But we're also making sure that people can choose where they live. Under this government, if they're elected, you have to live in certain areas where there's supply. What is wrong with a family wanting to stay in the suburb that they potentially raise their own family in, where they want to be close to babysitting their children or babysitting their grandkids? And that's what our policy is about. It's got choice at the centre, and it also hits the affordability challenges too.
All right, Premier, back to you.
No. The Leader of the Opposition is trying to suggest that the government wants to tell people where to live. That is patently absurd. What we believe is providing people choice, and they've got no choice at all if there isn't enough homes to live in, which is why the policy's got to be about supply. If the policy isn't about more supply, it's not making a difference. Their demand-driving, price-escalating policy deprives people of choice because they won't afford to live in any other home that they might choose to. And what you need when it comes to housing is a comprehensive policy. And we don't just talk to the tax cuts that we've delivered and we will deliver if we are elected. We're investing in skills with a record investment in technical colleges, TAFE, right. What we're doing in apprenticeships, and we know that makes a difference too.
You're very good at laundry lists as well, Premier, so thank you for that. Let's move on, though, to campaign promises, and I want to talk about the promises that you've made, because inflation remains high nationally, and you've pledged to put hundreds of dollars back into the pockets of families, in particular through your campaign pledges. What modelling have you done to show that these decisions won't further fuel inflation in our state?
Okay, so all of the... first thing is, thankfully, I'm very pleased that the inflation rate in South Australia, particularly Adelaide's CPI, has been below the national average, which is a good thing, but doesn't mean it's not a real-world issue. And the strength of the Southern Australian economy, which reflects itself in growing demand for existing houses has, of course, had an impact in some communities in terms of cost of living. So, as we've done throughout the course of the term, when we make a cost of living decision, there are a few things we take into account. First and foremost, is it achievable within the budget settings? Can we maintain fiscal discipline and deliver budget surpluses, which we've done every year? That's got to be the first thing. The second thing is making sure that we target our support to those people in the community that need it most. In our election policies, we'll be focusing on pensioners. For instance, giving 80,000 additional South Australians access to the seniors card, but also acknowledging that the most expensive thing any of us can do is to raise children. It's expensive. There's a cost everywhere you look. Don't we know it? So what we've decided to do is target people sending their kids to public schools and abolishing all of their school fees. It's affordable, it's appropriate, and it's targeted.
Let's now turn to the leader. What do you say in response to what the Labor Party has announced when it comes to cost of living relief, particularly with families?
I think I've been pretty clear. I think the public school fees, that's a great move. That's something that we support and I feel is a really practical thing to do to keep money in the pockets of hardworking families across the state. I'd love to see a little bit more when it comes to cost of living, and to be also clear, this has been an issue that's been on the minds of South Australians for 4 years, and on the cusp and the eve of an election, we've finally got a Premier realising that cost of living is an issue when he actually could have acted much sooner. So whilst we welcome the idea of the school fees, and if we're elected then we'll be pursuing that as well, there are other things that could be done. 50-cent fares, that's a real practical policy that can keep $100 in the pockets of South Australian families across the state. But this government hasn't announced a single savings measure this entire election campaign. So they like to chip away at us and our costings, but they've not announced a single savings measure at all this campaign.
We'll get to your costings in a moment, but Premier, why not do 50-cent fares?
Because we want to make sure what we do is consistent with the interests of budget discipline. I'm very proud of the fact that my government, for the first time in a very, very long time in the history of the state, in fact it's one of the few governments in the state's whole history that has delivered 4 budget surpluses, got the second best credit rating in the country, second only to Western Australia, for obvious reasons. Those include when the former Liberal government gave them our GST. We'll put that to another day. But so we've got to make sure that our measures are targeted and appropriate. Of course, when it comes to public transport, we believe in public transport, which is why we reversed their privatisation of public transport in South Australia, which means a better service.
That doesn't hit affordability.
Okay, hang on. Let's go back now and let's talk about costings if we can.
Well, can I just hit...
Very briefly.
I'll just hit a point, because the Premier talks a lot about budget discipline. We're on track to have $50 billion worth of debt.
Trust me, we're getting to that too, Leader. Don't worry. But let's go
budget discipline.
Let's go to your promises as well. What is the total value to date of what your party has pledged to voters ahead of the election?
Well, we'll be releasing all of that ahead of the election, as you would expect. And to my earlier point, the Premier hasn't announced a single savings measure. We have. But when it comes to getting the economy back on track, when it comes to looking at state
With
debt,
respect, Leader, that wasn't the question. The question is, how much have you promised to date? What's the dollar figure?
Well, we've been really proud about the policy suite that we've put forward, and a number of our signature policies are expensive, but they are going to turn the dial here in South Australia when it comes to payroll tax and lifting the threshold, when it comes to stamp duty, when it does come to 50-cent fares and the like. But all of that will be out in the open for South Australians to see ahead of the election, as per usual process.
Premier?
The Liberal Party have been announcing policy, we've been announcing policy. All of the policy that we've announced thus far at the election, we know what the costings are, we've announced it every single time, and it totals up to $1.9 billion. Why can't she tell you the number? Why can't she tell you the number? Not asking for how you're going to pay for it, simply asking what does it add up to. So to satisfy everybody's curiosity, I'll tell you the number. It's $5.7 billion, and all of those numbers are available in the Liberal Spending Tracker document. That's also on a website.
Did that, by the way?
It's also
Was that public service?
I don't interrupt. This document is available on the website, spendingtracker.com.au. You can have a look at it. And you will see there every single policy they've announced, all of their policy, and exactly how much it costs. And it's interesting, because in South Australia we have very strict rules when it comes to accuracy of electoral advertising. And do you know how many times they've complained about any of the numbers in here? Zero.
We'll give the Leader an opportunity to respond. Leader.
Well, a few things. First of all, that figure is completely fanciful.
Well, what's the number then?
Which we've said.
If the number's wrong, tell us the right one.
Don't interrupt me.
Fair enough.
But I don't trust Tom Koutsantonis to keep track of his own spending, so I sure as hell aren't going to trust him to keep in track of ours. But we will be releasing all of our policies. We'll be releasing our costings well before the election, so people will be able to see them.
Okay, let's stay on the budget. Do either of you have a plan to pay down the near $50 billion worth of state debt if elected, or is it just a matter of both of you kicking the can down the road for the next government? Yeah, you go first.
Okay, let's talk about the debt. This is really important. So in the budget that was handed down, in the mid-year budget review handed down a couple of weeks before the last state election, the Rob Lucas, Stephen Marshall budget, it said that debt today in South Australia was going to be $32 billion. That was their debt figure for 25-26, $32 billion. Do you know what the debt is now? $30 billion. The Labor government reduced the debt that Rob Lucas is going to deliver by $2 billion. Now, over the course of the forward estimates, as the tunnels get built and the new Women's and Children's Hospital comes online, of course, that has to be paid for. But what we see in the budget is South Australia, and we only had Fitch's only released their credit rating a couple of weeks ago, affirmed our status of the budget.
So do you have a plan or not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you've got a plan. What is it, very briefly?
Okay, so very quickly, we are growing the economy at a strong clip, which means we are delivering budget surpluses, which gives us the capacity to not just pay the debt, but also to pay it down, particularly into the future, once we get past the major infrastructure projects that are coming online, which I understand the Leader of the Opposition herself supports.
Leader, how do you pay down debt?
I agree with the Premier in that you need to grow the economy, that's point one, but you also need to stop the waste and stop the vanity projects, and you've got to get back to the bread and butter basics of managing your budget. Over the last 4 years alone, this government has blown its own budget, so the budget that it sets for itself, by $4.8 billion. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if any of you in the audience or at home were running a business, running a non-for-profit, and you blew your budget by $4.8 billion? There would be extraordinary consequences for you and a lot of questions. But the other thing that I'd say is that given the state of the debt and that we are hitting $50 billion into the future over the forwards, near $50 billion, it is going to require a long-term effort, and it is about bread and butter management of the budget, which is something that the Liberals can do extraordinarily well. Okay,
Premier, I'll give you an opportunity to respond there.
Well, the economy is growing, including here in South Australia at 5% per annum. The next best state, the second best state, is Western Australia at 3.2%. The national average is 2.9%. The place is on fire. But in respect to Ashton's remarks about bringing the debt down and her concerns regarding the position of the budget, we've never had the budget in such a strong position, delivering actual surpluses. And she refers to that overspend number, and I've heard her mention it before, so I went and actually checked out what the Leader of the Opposition was talking about. And what she's talking about is the people working through the front door of our hospitals. 700,000 people going through the emergency department every year, because no government in history, and I don't even think the Liberal government would do this, has a policy of stopping people at the front door of the hospital and says, sorry, the budget says you can't come in. That's just not the way it works. Now, the way you account for that is you make sure you deliver the services in the hospital system in particular, but you have the rest of the budget operating in such a way that is able to sustain that position, which is what we've done, not by forecasting surpluses, but by actually delivering them.
Premier, thank you. Now's the time of the debate where we give you both the opportunity to ask one question to each other. Premier, you spoke first. I will give the Leader the opportunity to ask the first question.
Sure.
To you.
Premier, we know that South Australians are doing it pretty tough at the moment, and that's why today I'm announcing that if we're elected, we'll be freezing politicians' salaries for the next 4 years. Will you join me?
Look, I want to thank Nick Xenophon for his question. As the Leader of the Opposition well knows, all MPs' salaries are set by the Remuneration Tribunal. In fact, politicians' salaries have been increasing below average public sector wage increases. Politicians' salaries have been increasing, in most instances, lower than the rate of inflation in recent years. So I'm very happy for the independent tribunal to set people's wages.
Is it worth a look at?
Well, you know, Rory, the Remuneration Tribunal has delivered real wage cuts, I think, in many instances to politicians. It's set by them, and I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Premier, your question to the Leader.
Thanks, Rory. John Howard had the principle and the conviction to put One Nation last. Was he wrong?
John Howard probably thought more of the Labor Party back then than I do now of this current state Labor government. But on the preferences, what I would say is this, that I'm willing to take some advice from the Premier on a range of things, but it's certainly not preferences. We're speaking about the Labor Party, who talks a big game about supporting AUKUS, and it's this big national endeavour, and that is true. And we're going to be centred here in South Australia, those opportunities. But then what does he do? He preferences the Greens number 2. The Greens who are anti-AUKUS, they want to tear it up and throw it out. And so I will be lectured to by the government and the Premier on preferences when he stops preferencing the South Australian Greens.
Got time for another question. Leader.
When Monica Wallstatt bravely spoke out about her repeated elective surgery cancellations, your PR machine went into overdrive and shared specific medical information with journalists. Do you know what type of medication she was on?
So I'm glad that
We keep this tight as well.
But do you know the type? Do you know the type?
Specific? No, I don't know the specific medication.
Do you know the type?
The type of medication that she was on. What I do know is that the Leader of the Opposition put out a press release.
Do you know the type?
Let me answer the question. The Leader of the Opposition put out a press release that contained factual errors regarding that particular patient's case and misrepresented the truth and demanded answers of the government. We went away and got those answers, which I think is the appropriate course of action. In terms of a specific medication, no, I don't know what that is. I don't get access to patient records, and nor would people reasonably expect me to. But I do know the circumstances.
You don't know the specific.
But I do know the circumstances.
That's a very interesting development.
But I do know the circumstances that led to the cancellations of those elective surgeries, and the fact that you misrepresented them.
You've got the opportunity for one question to the Leader now, and keep it tight, please.
Yep. The Liberal Party in South Australia has had 2 positions on net zero. The Liberal Party of South Australia officially confirmed that its federal MPs, South Australian federal MPs, are opposed to net zero. The state Liberal Party made clear that South Australian Liberal Party MPs at the state level support net zero. Has the Leader of the Opposition changed that position, and can she tell us what net zero is?
You have 20 seconds.
Okay. Well, look, energy affordability is a huge concern right across South Australia, and we make no apologies for putting affordability ahead of ideology. We are not committed, we've said this really publicly, we're not committed to your target of 100% renewables by next year. It's fine to have ambitions, but not at the expense.
Have you changed the policy on net zero?
Well, I've just stated what my position is.
Okay, let's...
So have you changed the policy? It's a yes or no. No, this is an important one because net zero speaks to an economic policy. But I haven't heard the answer. Have you changed the position that Vincent Tasia had, yes or no?
Our position is that we are not supportive of 100% renewables.
That wasn't the question. That wasn't the
Premier, we are tight for time. Let's move to closing remarks. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Rory. Look, can I start by thanking you and Ashton for being here? What is an important opportunity for people to contemplate the future of the state. We've never had more opportunity before us than we do now. We have a major policy platform that we're taking to this election, focusing on housing, focusing on translating that economic opportunity to young South Australians with a major investment in skills and training, because our preoccupation is to make sure that we don't just have a growing economy for the sake of it, but have a growing economy that actually improves people's living standards. In a world that is going through an extraordinary period of turbulence and instability, here in South Australia, a stable, united team is the way you deliver good outcomes for people. And the choice could not be more stark. Never, ever in the history of Australian politics has a bad opposition made a good government. And I think that speaks to the options that are available to the people of South Australia when they start casting their ballots tomorrow. But what I do know is this: regardless of the outcome, we will practice the democratic ritual in South Australia with civility and peace, and to the extent that the Leader of the Opposition facilitates that, along with every other person running, I thank them indeed.
Premier, thank you. To you, Leader.
Thank you very much, and thanks so much for the opportunity to be here and to see you all in this room. And I think what we have seen throughout the last hour and a bit is that we do have a Premier who is desperately focused on PR and desperately focused on spin. It has been the cornerstone, really, of his entire time in government. They will put that above everything else. They are much more focused on the razzle-dazzle and less so on getting the important things right for the people of South Australia. And if I'm your Premier, if I'm elected as the Premier of South Australia, then I will be fairly focused on getting the important things right, on making our state more affordable, delivering a much better health system, and on making sure that we get on top of crime. I think we do need a change in this state. We need a change because this is a government who went to the last election and promised a vision, but has delivered diddly squat. And I'll be a leader of a team who works together with colleagues right across the state to make sure that we get the important things right, and that's not just true of the city, but in the regions too.
Well, Premier, thank you to everyone who has come in here for today's Leaders' Debate. Thank you to everyone who has been following this across the various ABC platforms and across other South Australian media outlets. Of course, early voting tomorrow opens. If you want to jump on and get in, as they say in the classics, vote early, vote often, jump on to the Electoral Commission website to find out exactly where the closest early voting session setup is for you. But can you please once again thank the Premier Peter Malinauskas and Opposition Leader Ashton.